Welcome to a Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys along with us for the ride as we'll attempt to help you do just that. It's been some rough sledding, but nonetheless, we're coming out on the winning end of things here on the program with our handicappers. Going to be joined by a college basketball savant. If you've been following this guy's picks throughout the year that he's been on the program here, college football normally great. This year wasn't his best of seasons, although with proper money management, still managed to grind out a profit, which, let's face it, that's always a good thing. That's the goal, is it not? Although, aren't most gamblers fueled by such a deep-rooted sense, maybe even subliminal sense of self-sabotage that you don't even want to win, right? You just want to continue to take on more difficult and insurmountable challenges when it comes to your wagering. A lot to wager on, though, and we'll get into some college basketball picks with the professor who's going to join us here on the program. If you are betting, and we've already established a few things about the tournament, have we not? 14, I believe it's 14 teams have already punched their tickets in the so-called Weenie Conference Championships, but with the one-bid conferences for the most part. Every now and then you'll see one of these smaller conferences get an at-large bid. Certainly, I don't know, is the West Coast Conference considered one of those one-bid conferences? No. You got Gonzaga, St. Mary's almost routinely making it into the tournament on an annual basis. And Gonzaga would be the one big name that's qualified so far with certainty, although we know that the at-large bids, when they go out there, regardless of tournament results, probably still going to reflect the heavyweights that are at the top. So we'll get into that a little bit with the professor here as the conference tournaments, the major conference tournaments, come to a conclusion. And, of course, getting set for the NCAA tournament, which we get the announcement coming up on Sunday as to what's going to be happening. If you are betting, and you're going to be doing a lot of it, I was in a bar last night. It's actually a very fine restaurant that happens to have some bar seating. And it was turned into a simulcasting parlor as everybody in the bar nailed this horse at Turfway Park. And you're thinking, where else could this be happening? A very surreal scene there. And the entire restaurant ended up betting this 5-horse who jogged like Secretariat, keyed some huge payoffs. So drinks were flying around, but interesting how they were able to change the atmosphere completely because everybody loves to get on top of a winner. If you have some winners or think you're onto something, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all online gaming in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA to college basketball, the NHL, UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with the odds, the stats, and more. For every game, every play, every win, BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, I'm glad to see this because we just did this is no filter after all.
Exactly.
So what the fuck do we care? No, it is no filter, and we do a program on a daily basis on a site called Bleacher Brothers, and every Friday we feature the professor, and he does his version of the big board. So I was asked by the people there, and this would not happen here on NoFilter.net, where it's essentially all these people that were silenced by political correctness. Found a home here. I mean, there were many. Tony Bruno, I see, is back here, and we've had many other people that have come on board on NoFilter.net based on that very same principle that, hey, they took my number down and for saying something that was perceived to be out of the boundaries of good taste. So we were asked to kind of clean up a couple of things that we were doing. We were doing a lot of swearing on this show, and not overwhelmingly so, but enough for emphasis. And of course, the professor. There may have been a dose or two of, somewhat, you would say, not necessarily in the best of taste sexual innuendos on some of your big board renditions. Brilliant, though. Always. I mean, I was a huge fan of all of it. But today's edition, was that really you or artificially
Yes, it was really me.
generated? So the professor puts on a shirt and tie, which, by the way, I mean, you could have either been, a high ranking ambassador to another country in the world, or you could have been the guy they bring in as the closer on a used car lot there on 441.
I'm not sure that's complimentary.
No, I mean, but you look great. I mean, it really was something. There was
Well,
a
I don't know
proof.
that closer on a used car lot. It's
No,
like,
that's the guy they bring in. He's had a couple of
yeah, but
cigarettes.
everybody hates that guy. Like, have you ever met that
Eventually,
guy
yeah.
and not felt like you were in the presence of a total bag of slime?
He seems like he's your friend at the time. I
Right.
guess that's the way I
And
would.
then he gives you the, well, let me go talk to my manager.
Right.
And, oh, yeah, well, we could give you the $700 off sticker, but we're going to need you to spend 1,500 on undercoating. For what the fuck is undercoating? Like,
Dealer prep is always the best, right?
yes.
They had the guy out with a hose wash the car down because there was a little bit of schmutz on it, and the next thing you know, it's $650.
All right.
Added to the tag.
Normally, our dealer costs are $850, but for you, we're going to cut it down to 500.
Because you've been a strong proponent of our dealership and a big
Yes.
part of our success, Mr. DeForest. Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, but that guy always wins, man, and he'll tell you straight up, "This is great." It's almost like the Trump economy, where he says, "Listen, you're going to be making more money in a couple of years. Think about it that way." So, and so you think, "Oh, this guy has a lot of faith in me. So this $539 a month isn't going to hurt a bit, a couple of years from now. So I'll experience a
I
little
mean,
bit of."
honestly, I feel like that's like a 5 years ago price. I feel like these
Yeah,
days,
you're
like,
right.
if you get out at 25.39 a month, you've done okay.
Yeah, on a 72-month lease
Right.
with 3,500 down. All
Or
right.
like on like the lowest end, Benz or Volkswagen or an upper end Volkswagen or something.
How are we going to pay for this? That's the question everybody's asking themselves. And one way of doing it, of course, is to just abdicate any sense of responsibility that you might have and start gambling heavily on these college basketball games, Professor. So, this time of the year, how have you been faring so far with the tournament action? And I know you've been making some selections
Well,
here on the
we
show,
kicked
but
some ass last week. Well, we go 6-1, 7-1 on the show last week, something like that.
very nice. Yeah, yeah.
Um, let's see. I obviously had a great last Friday. I want to say Saturday was also good, and then Sunday we stepped on a landmine
Ah,
with UAB going into Tulane, and then this week I got to be honest. I've been up and down, but I feel okay about my opinion because, like, all the losses are on fluke shooting, and we've seen a lot of that. Got to be honest. I've had some wins on fluke shooting too. I took Montana the other night over Northern Colorado in the Big Sky Finals, and Montana, I think, shot 71% from the first half and
wow.
74% from three. So, I mean, the kind of fluky shooting thing runs both ways. So I feel like the opinion's been good, but we've run into some shooting nights by the opponent. Which, it's basketball; it's going to happen. That's why you deal. Oh, actually, no, we got kicked in the sack yesterday, uh, laying two with Marquette when Xavier hit like a half court shot at the end to push.
Wow.
So, I mean, we definitely took a kick in the sack, but it was a push, not a loss. So, that happens, particularly when you're dealing in volume. Which for the rest of this weekend, and then through again Thursday through Sunday next week, we will definitely be dealing in volume again. So it is what it is.
A lot of fun though, and it's shaping up.
Always.
I mean, maybe it sounds almost like cliche now, where it's wide open. It seems like every year, but I don't know. Has it been in recent times as tough to pinpoint a winner in the tournament as it might be this year?
I don't think it's that tough. I mean,
No.
look, I'm not, well, look, if you are, yeah, look, last year I think was pretty easy. I mean, the whole country was on UConn,
Yeah.
which again made the very friendly pre tournament number. It was like 600, 700, something like that. Uh, Somewhat of a head scratcher. So I think maybe people just talked themselves away from UConn last year. Um, is it more wide open than that? It is. But are there some definitive favorites? Yeah. I mean, again, we've talked about Auburn. They've stumbled a little bit coming home but again, you look at those two games they lost last week. They didn't get blown out in either game. They played two very good basketball teams, and and we're on the wrong end of it. I don't know that necessarily reduces what they are coming. I still think they're the best team in the country. I do, even with the two losses. Duke now, of course, with Cooper Flag doing who knows what to his ankle yesterday, is definitely a mystery one. And I saw a good point by somebody, which is that, given what happened with Kenyon Martin some years ago, where they dropped Cincinnati from the overall number one to like the lowest number two seed, given what happened with Florida State football last year, where they left them out of the playoff, if you're Duke, would be very smart to be 100% quiet about that injury between now and Sunday's selection committee, because if he is hurt badly, you don't want the committee knowing about it and probably dropping you at least a line. And if he's healthy, you'd prefer to keep that a secret too going into the tournament. So I think John Shire and Duke will probably be very cagey about information on that injury, and unless some hospital worker or something leaks it
Yeah.
out, we probably won't know till Monday what the actual status of his ankle is.
The
Um,
official reports, though, no fracture. So dealing with some
I
kind
mean,
of
again, are we taking that for granted? I mean, they took him out in a freaking wheelchair. I'm not
yeah,
necessarily, and also with ankles. Let's be honest, a bad high ankle sprain, in terms of a limited time frame like this, is basically the same thing.
yes.
As I mean, for a thing where you're going to have to go constantly over the next 3 to 4 weeks, a bad high ankle would be just as bad as a broken ankle in terms of impact. So again, I don't think we're going to have a real piece of information on that
I
until
bet you were
Monday.
experiencing the same kind of pain, though,
Oh
with your
yeah,
fondness for Duke,
yeah. I love Duke, and I was not.
a team that appeared to be on that UConn type of role coming into the tournament.
I
There,
don't know that I think they were in that on that level
no,
again. But look, they've played one top quality opponent in the last month and a half, and they lost the game.
okay,
So I mean, it really is a question of quality of competition versus what they've shown. Now, have they smoked a lot of bad teams? They have. So they've done their part by blowing people out. But can you point to a win of since the start of February, or even really the second week of January, and say, oh, that's the win that sells me on Duke? I don't think that game exists.
all right, that's fair.
Um, the Florida Gators on a real roll. I got to tell you, if any team is starting to shape up like a juggernaut, it might be Florida. We'll see how the rest of the SEC tournament plays out. We'll see what they look like today and potentially in the finals. But if you're looking at a team that really looks like they got it all going their way, uh, University of Florida, and then a little bit odds friendlier, so a team I'm more into, Houston looks, every bit as good as Houston is. Houston looks as good or better than they have looked coming into the tournament in 4 or 5 years, basically since COVID started. And they have been a top seed in the tournament every year. So I think Houston will get an interesting test today against a BYU team that shoots the ball really, really well. But if they can, you know, put their normal kind of defensive performance up against BYU, then I think you got to start taking the Cougars pretty seriously, because they are much more offensively efficient than they have been in the past. And again, you're talking about a team of the SEC has been the best conference, but the Big 12 has been nipping on its heels. And you're talking about a team that hasn't lost a game since February the 1st, playing in the Big 12. I mean, they're Houston, so it's not always pretty in terms of final margin, because they're not a team that's going to generally put a big, 20, 25 point beating on somebody. But I mean, they keep getting the job done. So, going in, I think we have, again, maybe not an overwhelming favorite like UConn last year, but 4 very solid candidates at the top,
All right, you have some plays in the immediate future, as in today,
as in today.
and you have a lot of action to choose from here. But you opened up by embracing Tom Izzo in Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Sparty is a tough team to do back-to-back noon spots at. Oregon played early yesterday. They got to turn around and play it again. And I think when you're looking at these West Coast teams, particularly if you watch the the end of the game last night between USC and Purdue, which USC should have won. But the last, excuse me, the last 5 minutes of that game, they were really on the struggle bus, and you have to wonder if that cross country flight, followed by a series of back-to-back games, caught up to them in the final 5 minutes of that game. I wouldn't be surprised, again, particularly with the early tip-off time. If you're Oregon, I mean, you're playing your home games, at least 3, in some cases 6 or 7 hours later than a noon start. So a noon start on a back-to-back, I think that's too much for the Ducks. Sparty comes into this game on a pretty good roll themselves. This number's bounced around a lot. 5.5 last night, 6.5 earlier today, back to 5.5 today. So I'm definitely looking for Tom Izzo and Sparty to come out on top after finishing the season very strong in the Big 12. Another team on quite the roll, haven't lost a game since the second week of February. Beat a bunch of good teams, including some nice road wins within that. So we're looking at Sparty -5 and a hook at noon.
All right, and Loyola, Illinois.
Yeah,
Also,
a game unfortunately just went up a point, went from 1.5 to 2.5, but we're still on the Ramblers here. Again, St. Louis got pushed pretty good if you watched that game yesterday with Davidson. They pulled away a little bit at the end, but that was a one-possession game for like 35 minutes. Loyola finished strong. They had a really good series of shooting games to finish the year out, going up into the upper 70s and even the 80s against Davidson themselves. And then Massachusetts, they only scored 74, but if you watch the first half of the game, they just shot the hell out of the ball, got up like 20, and then coasted home. So they seem to be on a little bit of an offensive roll. They get the benefit of not being on the back-to-back to a team. Again, early day start, 2 o'clock for a St. Louis team that got pushed, so you have to factor in a little bit of fatigue there. I like to – and, of course, we know Loyola seems to get it going this time of year pretty much annually. So I do like the Ramblers in this spot, although, as we know, I'm not the biggest fan of the program.
is Sister Jean still with us?
I have no idea.
Or did she check out? Dead or alive, Sister Jean?
I'm going to say alive because I feel like I would definitely know if she died.
Yeah.
But
say alive also.
Still alive.
Wow.
105 years old.
Get out of here.
And that's a run. Like,
how many years ago was it that she owned that brothel?
I mean, she's getting to the point where, like, is it more impressive that Loyola actually made a Final Four?
Yeah.
Or that Sister Jean lead? Which is more unlikely, living to 105 or actually seeing Loyola make a Final Four in the modern era?
You would have to say Illinois making it to the Final Four. No,
I mean, 105 though,
and still out there in her
and lives in Chicago. It's not like she's one of these Buddhist monks who lives on the top of a mountain and breathes pure air and
exactly.
and drinks nothing but natural glacier water their whole life, surviving on yak meat. It's she's living in Chicago. Like 105 is pretty. I mean, genetically speaking, it's a shame we didn't get some reproduction of those genes because 105. That's a good run, man. That's a deep run in the tournament.
Yeah, you got to try and bottle that and sell it somehow,
right?
It's like a magic elixir this woman is on. All right, Wisconsin and UCLA. You as I recall, you take a stand against the Bruins quite frequently. Is that true, Professor?
No, I actually rode the Bruins coming.
Oh, you did? Okay.
They got a nice run, but we've also been riding Wisconsin all year long. We really like this Badgers team. For those of you who remember the Bennett days of their total departure, Wisconsin is a very offensive-oriented, upper-pace basketball team. And again, UCLA is kind of the opposite. They prefer, a pace more into the 60s. I think they're going to have problems defending Wisconsin today. I think at 1.5, Wisconsin's a bit of a steal. It's probably, at least in the early games, my favorite game of the day. And I also kind of like the over here at 141.5. I think Wisconsin is very good at dictating pace here. You saw them. Now they lost the game to Sparty, but they played Sparty. I believe Sparty won in the 80s and Wisconsin lost in the high 70s. So if you can push Sparty to that kind of pace, I think you can get it going with UCLA. So we like the over here at 141.5. And a few extras we didn't do on the other show.
All right.
Like Tulane, who's finished on a pretty good roll, catching 3.5 from FAU, which honestly is kind of a mystery to me. Tulane, Won 5 of the last 7, including, as we said, beating a UAB team, was on a pretty good roll. Badly over the weekend. FAU, they've improved over the course of the season, but this is not anywhere close to what was the team under Dusty May. Of course, they lost John L. Davis and Alexi, whatever his name is, to Michigan.
Vlad
Uh,
Golden, too, the big guy.
that's who I was talking about. Vlad Golden. I called him Alexi. Excuse me. I mixed up.
Well, it's just wanted to say, man.
But again, FAU only 3-4 in their last 7. Most of the wins, if we're being honest, were against South Florida, Charlotte the other day. Not the strongest teams to ever come down the pipe. They got blown out by Memphis. They lost it by 10 to North Texas. I'm looking at the injury report and I don't see anything. So why this number is with Florida Atlantic laying 3.5, other than FAU's just got some lingering name value, I can't explain this line at all. So give me Tulane plus the 3 and a hook. We got Maryland. Finished the season strong, only laying 1.5 to an Illinois team, who's also, let's be honest, kind of on a bit of a roll. But I think Maryland's much stronger here. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-1 in their last 8, with the only loss being to Sparty on a half-court shot at the end. A game they lost 58-55. I don't factor in the fatigue thing as much in night games, but if you are, that favors Maryland here. 1.5, I got to take Maryland. And then we finish out with the aforementioned Duke Blue Devils, who are 7.5 to North Carolina without Cooper Flagg. Carolina's playing for their lives. This is saying Flagg is a game time decision. I've read in several
I
places
can't imagine.
he is definitively out for this game. So watch the injury report. But if Flagg is out, I like Carolina not only 7.5. I would definitely taste them on the money line, because I don't think without Cooper Flagg, Duke will win this game. And I'm not even sure, honestly, without Flagg, how interested they are in winning this game. They may go for getting a couple extra days of rest if they're without their best player in that. And finally, 9:30, finishing up in the Big 12 tournament, Texas Tech. Now, they did collapse a little bit last night against Baylor. They ended up with a 2-point victory in a game they were up 12 most of the end of the game. I don't think that will carry over here. Arizona last night, very fortunate shooting night against Kansas. I want to say they shot like 54% from the field. If you've watched Arizona this year, they have not been week to week consistent. So I wouldn't expect that to necessarily repeat itself. And in fact, they got some fluky offensive games. So definitely like Texas Tech, another team we've been riding as the season closes, minus the 2 and a hook in that spot.
That is some list there. That's a laundry list of games, my
I
friend.
mean, that's what this time of year
Yeah.
is, Defo.
How great is that, people?
If you love college basketball,
I mean,
is.
you could clearly sense the love was there, my friend.
It's a whole day of
It was great.
television and games that are interesting matchups, and so let everybody celebrate. Have a good time.
Yeah, I did want to mention too before, and you got to know this gentleman a little bit, at least through interviews that we did. John Feinstein, who it was always tremendous talking about college basketball. Of course, made his name by his first book that he wrote, which was A Season on the Brink, where he follows Bobby Knight around. Nobody had this kind of access to Knight, and it was brilliantly done. Kind of a trailblazer and a renaissance in sports journalism and getting this kind of access. Almost George Plimpton-esque at that point, although he didn't immerse himself in anything. But I couldn't believe it, Professor. We just tried to wire him into a show as recently as a week ago. And
Yeah.
there was no indication there was anything wrong with this guy, except that he couldn't technically figure out how to download Google Chrome, which I would probably be in the same boat. But to find out that he passed away yesterday,
Yeah.
that
I mean, a
was a
huge
haymaker
shock
from hell. It
to the
really was.
world.
Wow.
Obviously, R.I.P. A guy wrote just tons of great books on a wide variety. Again, I am not a golf guy, but his
Yeah.
book, A Good Walk Spoiled, is one of my all-time favorite sports books.
Yeah. I read it.
Everybody obviously talks about A Season on the Brink, and it was It was a brilliant book, and one that really pissed Bobby Knight off. So it gets my seal of approval.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, really, the man made the Army Navy game interesting in a book. Like, he wrote a book about the Army Navy football game, the most dreadful college football game of the year on an annual basis. And I mean, he wrote a book about the Patriot League in college basketball, and it was fantastic. Like, I mean, so many interesting stories lost with his passing, and obviously, we are all in the world of sports lesser for him, and great on ESPN too in the
Early
in
days
the
of the
days
sports reporters.
where sports reporters was a tough show to watch at sometimes.
Yeah.
Bob Ryan blathering on with his Boston
Is
accent
your Boston bias? Yeah.
week after week.
What about shooting from the lip, Lupica? He was all right there, and
I was not a big Lupica fan.
no,
Honestly,
I like
I
Lupica.
really enjoyed Lupica's writing.
Yeah,
I never, yeah, it's like, okay, and actually, the even better example, like when Mitch Albom was just a sports writer, I really enjoyed Mitch Albom.
yeah.
But then when it became like Tuesday for Maury's, like I write, spiritual books for suburban housewives guy, like it's like go away. I don't want anything to do with that Mitch Albom,
What drugs did he have to
right?
ingest to get to
I,
that point? Yeah.
I don't care about the 5 people you meet in
Tuesdays
heaven,
with Maury should have been at the Olympic Auditorium. What are you talking about? Watching, a Mexican fight a Mexican American.
but I mean, great on the sports reporters, great in ESPN, and I don't know, probably the best sports writer since Frank DeFord. Anyway, I
Yeah,
mean,
tremendous.
he. I don't know that he's number one all time, but he's on the short list, right? I mean, at least in
No
terms
doubt.
of books.
Belongs up there with anybody that ever made a name for himself in that
All right.
rank.
I
Unbelievable.
mean, I don't know if he's going to go down with Grantland Rice and Ring Lardner and these people, but in terms of people who did it during my lifetime, as good as anybody, if not the absolute best.
And a variety of different things, very versatile. And then he was a columnist with the Washington Post. So we're going to miss you, man. That hit me hard yesterday. When you just were speaking with the guys, you were with me on that show.
All right.
We were trying to put together, and have filled in very nobly.
I mean, it's crazy to think that if we had managed to connect, if he hadn't been trying to come in on Safari, which
It
doesn't
might
work
have been the
with our show,
last.
might have been the last interview with John Feinstein. Crazy, man.
I always loved having him on shows. Added an element of distinction to anything that I was doing. That's for sure. We didn't get a chance to get to the big board here today, but
I don't think this
it was
audience would.
transformational. Yes, I don't know that this audience would have been ready for it.
Yeah, I think that was kind of an inside joke.
Yeah,
So
that was a
perhaps
fantastic
not
rendition there.
reserved for this particular audience who enjoys things a little bit more ribald to
Yeah, I mean,
begin with.
it's
Anyway.
original raw format, but the
So we're giving you a lot of degenerate content, and instead give you a bunch of games. Hopefully,
that was great.
have another kick-ass Friday.
All right, brilliant stuff as always, Professor. We can't thank you enough. Thanks so much for joining us here on Bury Your Bookie.
You have a great one, Defo.
All right, the Professor, ladies and gentlemen. So that was a lot of fun. He had a ton of games here. Wow. Michigan State -6.5. He liked Loyola, Illinois. That game went up to 2.5 from 1.5 when we talked about it earlier this morning. Wisconsin -1.5 over UCLA. He likes the over in the game, 141 and a hook. Take the over. Tulane over FAU. I would tend to agree with him there. I haven't watched a few FAU games because of the fact that they're from South Florida here. We know the coach a little bit, and they had this remarkable run to the Final Four with Dusty May, now with Michigan, who tailed off towards the end of the regular season with 3 straight losses. But it's not the same team, and they have been overwhelmingly impressive in the games that I watched. So having seen them a little bit and not even knowing that much about Tulane, I'll take the professor's word for it that Tulane +3 and a hook, probably a good play there. And then he also liked Maryland -1.5 over Illinois. North Carolina getting 7 and a hook from Duke. And Texas Tech -2.5 Arizona. All right, you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the tournament. We'll talk to you again on Monday, the next edition of Bury Your Bookie. For everybody at No Filter, Greenlight Ventures, the Professor, and of course Bet Online. I'm Jeff DeForest. We'll see you next time as we continue this quest to make some money by burying your bookie.